Why do you stand looking up toward heaven? This past Thursday was the feast of Jesus' Ascension, a church celebration that formally ranks at the same level as Christmas, Easter, Pentecost, and All Saints' Day. The story is one of the stranger events recorded in the New Testament. Somehow it's easier to believe the idea of a virgin birth, resurrection, or mystical tongues of fire fluttering over people's heads than to imagine someone flying off into the sky. Maybe that's because we have too much exposure to superheroes in the modern Western world, leading us to relate the scene to comic books or fantasy movies. But really, it's just kind of hard to know. With our current understanding of the universe, I suspect that most modern Christians would prefer if this story had never been included in the Bible. However, as part of what I call the incarnation cycle, the ascension would have held significant meaning for ancient people. To catch any of its message, though, we need to go all the way back in the beginning. I know that I frequently mention the three realms of the ancient cosmos: the celestial, which is home of the divine; the earthly, the dwelling of humans and animals; and the underworld, home to the unknown monsters of chaos. But where did those realms even come from? In ancient Near Eastern creation stories, chaos was the normative state of reality. So the underworld and fear of the unknown was more or less the foundation of human existence. At some point in the past, the gods appeared and fought back the forces of chaos, carving out a celestial realm of order and peace. Chaos, however, kept trying to reclaim its territory. So rather than being stuck with the annoyance of a constant barrage of border skirmishes, the gods established the earthly realm, a distinct layer of reality that blended both chaos and order. In this realm, God set humans, who were tasked with keeping things organized, but due to our having been formed from remnants of chaos's defeat, weren't particularly good at doing it. Those who sought the divine worked toward peace and harmony. But many of us fell back toward a chaotic state, leading to deceit, selfish competition, and war. So according to most cultures of the time, the earthly realm was something of a functional accident at best. We're basically a blister, preventing chaos from further rubbing up against and irritating or inconveniencing the divine. Then came a group of people we call the Hebrews. Their understanding of the cosmos was a bit different than everyone around them. Yes, they still structured the universe according to the three realms, but they understood the divine to be a pre-existent architect of reality. One day, largely out of a sense of playfulness, the divine established light and darkness, forming a distinction between itself and the broader universe. The next day, it made a new distinction, this time separating air and water. The day after that, it brought up land from the water. For the following 3 days, it placed inhabitants into each world that it had made. The sun, moon, and stars reflecting the beings of the celestial realm. Creatures mysterious and unknown roaming the seas while birds took to the air. And finally, all of the living things that wander the land, culminating its work with humans, who, having reason, creativity, and the capacity to love, most closely reflected the nature of the divine itself. Despite this joyful foundation, Humans gradually became enamored with self and chaos, leading to all the problems we experience in the world today. As we moved more toward disorder, we forgot that goodness, generosity, and love underlies creation. Blaming the divine for our struggles, we soon began telling stories of impenetrable barriers between the realms, ones that prevented any movement from the lower toward the upper, and even restricted the divine from entering the underworld. With this understanding established, we viewed both death and the heavens with fear, seeing our lives as toys for the gods to play with until they eventually became bored and allowed us to fade into the grave. Then came the incarnation cycle. The divine, recognizing our confusion and fear, determined to become human, to dwell among us not as a celestial being, but as actual mortal flesh and blood, disrupting any barrier that might separate the divine from the earthly realm. As his life ended, this person, who we call Jesus of Nazareth, being fully mortal, became a native inhabitant of the underworld, just like everyone else does. Thus, sharing the fate of humans, the divine confounded us by passing through the barrier we thought divided it from death. Once in the grave, divinity once again reveals its full self, flooding the darkness with light and displaying the created order underlying even the unknown. As proof of this mastery, they rip the gates of hell from their hinges and triumphantly lead those trapped by ignorance, fear, and confusion back toward life. This is where we, as modern American Christians, normally end the story, thinking everything's wrapped up and, good as it may be, leaving ourselves trapped in Easter, which means that we end up missing the point of what the kingdom of heaven even is. The ancient mind, however, still recognized a significant problem and a substantial barrier. The divine could come to us. We needn't fear the grave. The dead might again find life, but humanity remained separated from, and therefore afraid and suspicious of, the divine. For no mortal could hope to pierce the veil between the earthly and the celestial realms, leaving us forever excluded from the land of light. And that is why the ascension is so important, why the ancient world needed to communicate this unusual scene. Just as he opened death from the inside, Christ, both fully human and fully divine, physically shatters that last barrier dividing us from God. The universe is once again whole, every realm fully under the authority, order, generosity, and love of the divine, who had created it all in the first place. Humans need not fear death, for alongside Christ, we have a guide and guardian for what's to come. Nor need we fear the struggles and pains of life, as in time that too shall be changed, leading to life upon life upon life. The problem for us now is, how can we relate to the wonder and stunned joy the disciples recognized at the ascension when we live under a completely different understanding of the cosmos? Digging 6 feet under isn't going to lead us to anything but more ground. And flying off into the sky becomes especially problematic once you run out of atmosphere. So how can the ascension help us understand or appreciate anything about God in a realm where gods no longer openly exist? It all comes down to barriers. We still hold them. We still build them. We still fight over them. Borders and walls and armies, watchtowers, no man's land, and multiplying forms of defense and surveillance. Whether it's between nations or religions or political parties or social groups, those on the outside are to be hated and feared, while those on the inside struggle to protect one another through domination and oppression. Throughout the history of the church, and especially within modern American Christianity, people are constantly barring one another from heaven and condemning others to hell. We continue to separate ourselves into smaller and smaller units until we're each isolated inside our paranoid perfection and inane certainty of divine favor for us alone. We transform ourselves into the very gods our ancestors feared, each toying with each other's lives as we impose ourselves over a diminutive, utterly pointless little universe of our own design. Understanding the incarnation cycle can break that illusion. Incarnation, death, resurrection, and ascension are more than just a story. They're a new concept of reality. With everything united under the reign of the divine, humans are once again free to explore and create and love and share. With the most impenetrable barriers in existence erased, there's no more need for us, especially as God's image, to maintain earthly ones we keep erecting against one another. We can step past the already not yet nonsense that the church has bought into for so long. Through the incarnation cycle, we find that the kingdom of heaven isn't simply at hand or near. It isn't just quite beyond our sight or ever so slightly beyond our grasp. No, it is here. The kingdom is present, and God has set it directly in our hands, yours and mine. So no matter your understanding of capital R reality, the message is the same. The barriers have fallen. So with cosmic divisions long ago dissolved, why do we keep clinging to ones even less real? Jesus, who only a few weeks ago reminded us, "I am the gateway," has opened everything and everywhere to each and all of us. We as Christians stand both within and as part of that gateway, not so that we can prevent passage, but so we can assist any who might wish to traverse the bridge to whatever realm from which they may have believed themselves to be banned. We as individuals are not alone, nor need anyone remain alone. Reality has been laid open under the watchful and loving eye of its creator, and we, God's children, are free to play and explore. So the two strangers' question to the disciples still applies. Why do you stand looking up toward heaven when the divine is already here? Amen.